It had to have been tough for her. Some of the Bible scholars estimate she was probably about 15. People married much younger in those days. Other places in the world, in America, there are people who by the time they're 5 or 6 years old are working in a factory or working in the fields, and they mature much faster than we do in our country here. And so they tend to marry younger as well, and therefore some of the Bible scholars expect, based on how things were done back in the day, that she was about 15. She must have been confused. As a matter of fact, the Bible says she was. It says she was troubled when the angel Gabriel first showed up and told her that she was highly favored. And she wanted to know what that meant. And he said, and I'm paraphrasing now, God has chosen you to be the mother of the Messiah. She was indignant to some degree. I mean, because of the fact that it was very important to her that she had kept her virginity. It was very important in that entire culture. That's why engagements back then lasted typically at least a year. So from the time they got engaged until the time they married, no baby would have been born, which would indicate that the woman was a virgin. And so that's why those engagements lasted that long. And so now she's engaged to a man whose name is Joseph. And when the angel says, God has chosen you, you're going to have a child, her immediate response, hey, I'm a virgin. Then the angel explained to her, well, what's going to happen is that the Holy Spirit's going to come upon you and place this child inside of you, and you're going to have this child. And then when he left and she began to contemplate that, she sang a song. It's in the first chapter of the book of Luke. In that song, she pointed out that God had blessed her because of her humility. So she says she was humble. Let's hope that she was. She then goes and sees a cousin of hers who is going to have another baby that will be known as John ben Zechariah, or John the Baptist as we would know him today. And then you can imagine if people were then like people are now, the gossip that must have circulated when this 15-year-old girl, who is yet engaged and not yet married, is showing the signs of pregnancy. So on the one hand, there must have been joy inside of her. I know that I'm bearing the Son of God. This is an amazing and tremendous honor. She actually said, people from generations from now on will call me blessed because I have been chosen for this. I don't know how that would have compared with the feelings that she must have had when the people were whispering when she walked down the street. Look, this is an unwed mother. In various cultures at various times, that's viewed differently. But even in America today, when our country is much more open-minded than it's ever been in my lifetime, there would still be people who would speculate about the morality of an unwed mother. And you can imagine the people in that close-knit community in the small town where she lived talking about, well, we thought better. We thought Mary was a good girl. Her husband, of course, or her husband-to-be, they were just engaged, when he found out about it, he immediately assumed the same thing, that she had been promiscuous, and he decided that he would put her away. Understand that in that culture, an engagement was as binding as a marriage, and it took a kind of divorce to end it, and he was going to go through the process of putting her away. I mean, I think I would be indignant too if I thought that my bride-to-be was pregnant from another man. God himself sent an angel to speak to him in his dreams, actually, to tell Joseph, no. Now, this is of God. She's not been unfaithful to you. She's pure. As a matter of fact, she had to be very pure. God would not have chosen her for this particular task. And now you can imagine the ridicule that Joseph faced, where the people in their community would make fun of him. Is this man a complete idiot? Either he too has been immoral by their cultural standards, or he's an idiot because he's not realizing what she's done. And he's staying with her. So it had to be a confusing time for them. On one hand, the joy of knowing God has chosen this woman to bear the child that is going to save the world. On the other hand, the lack of understanding from the people around them, and the ridicule and the gossip and condemnation, which had to have occurred. It would happen today. I'm convinced it would have happened back then. So then the census comes along. They have to travel. So they go back to the town of Bethlehem. You've heard this story many times. We've been singing about it all morning. When they get there, as you recall, there is no room in any inn. They're all booked up. And so a kind innkeeper says, well, at least I've got a place where you can have some shelter. Go around where the stable is. Surely Joseph would have scattered as much clean straw as he could have, and there they waited. And you would think if God had chosen to send his son through this woman, that somehow he would have made it an amazing event. I mean, look what we do in our day and time. If just one of the monarchy in England gets married, it's a worldwide television event full of all this pomp and circumstance and splendor. And yet God decides that this child will be born, not even in a regular room, but outside. We think a lot about that birth this time of year, the shepherds in the field, how that first one angel showed up to tell them something is really amazing going on here and you need to know about it. And then after that angel gives his proclamation, a whole host showed up and they're singing. And I love the way we in the Churches of Christ sing. I love our a cappella singing, but I would imagine if you heard a whole host of angels in the heavens singing, it would be amazing. Now, I don't know if they sang 4-part harmony or not, but their singing would have been absolutely beautiful. And the shepherds come. And Mary's thinking, what is this all about? As a matter of fact, you'll find throughout the references to Mary that she would ponder things in her heart. When now it's finally time to dedicate Jesus, to circumcise him and give him his name. And they give him a name, which in the Old Testament would have been known as Joshua. That would be the Hebrew version of it, but they give him the Greek version, or at least that's what we read about in our Greek New Testaments, which is Jesus. And they come to make the sacrifice that they're supposed to do. And when they come to make the sacrifice, if you read the story in Luke chapter 2, the sacrifice that they give is the one given by people who are poor, not by people who are wealthy, which indicates that Joseph and Mary didn't have much money anyway. But it was there where another interesting thing is going to occur. There are 2 prophets there, one male and one female, that have been waiting there at the temple. They've been told something is about to happen. The fellow's name is Simeon. He doesn't want to die, as a matter of fact, until he's seen the Messiah, because God has told this prophet that the Messiah is going to be here. He's going to be here soon. And so he starts singing a song, as a matter of fact, praising God, and he talks about that. And if we can start down, gentlemen, in about verse, I think that is 33, if we put that on the screen, Luke chapter 2, verse 33. Here's what else he said. The child's father and mother marveled at what was said about him. Now, you understand that they're referring to Joseph as his father in an accommodative sense, because we've already been told in this story earlier in this chapter that Joseph was not the actual father. He is the father in the sense that he's going to raise this child, but he's not the one who has been involved in creating this child. And so the child's father and mother marveled at what was said about him. The next verse says, then Simeon blessed them and said to Mary, his mother, this child is destined to cause the falling and rising of many in Israel, and to be a sign that will be spoken against. Now, just stop there for a second. I have been present for the birth of my children. Our oldest child, Angel, who's 43 years old, back then the delivery was much more civilized. They took the mother into a room and you went outside and waited. Then some guy named Lamaze came along who just messed up the whole world. And you had to learn how to breathe and to be the coach. And so I was there for the birth of our next 2 children, including Kimberly, who is sitting right over there. And I've watched Alice when she was handed our children, doing what I guess all mothers do, where she counts the fingers and toes for some reason. I don't know why mothers do that. And then to marvel at this little child and to just beam with joy because she has brought this life into the world. And all that pain that was suffered just moments before in the delivery of that child seems to be forgotten instantaneously as she holds that child in her arms. As a man, I look at the labor and go, thank you, God, for having women do that. But as a man, when I see that part of the birth process, I think, well, God, I'm a little jealous of the women who can now hold this child to their breast, know that it grew within their body. And you can imagine what it would be like if somebody could walk in the room at that time, or 8 days later, if they could walk into the room and say, by the way, God has given me a prophecy about this child. Let me tell you what his or her future will be. Would you really want to know? What's going to happen in a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, to know when your child is going to have the bad things happen, to know when your child is going to die. I don't know that I would want to know that future predicted, because you know it's not all going to be bliss and happiness. There's going to be pain throughout the process. But to have the prophet walk in and say, this child is destined to cause the falling and rising of many in Israel. Okay. And to be a sign that will be spoken against. People, at least some people, are going to hate your child. People, at least some people, are going to want to kill your child. And it's actually going to happen. So look what he says to her next. So that the thoughts of many hearts will be revealed, indicating he's going to show people what they really are, because people can pretend to be this or pretend to be that, but the way they're going to react to Jesus is going to show who they really are in their hearts. It's going to expose them. But this next verse that just had to be so hard for her. And a sword will pierce your own soul too. What parent would want to hear that? What parent would want to anticipate that future for her child or his child? The story goes on, even in the same chapter, in Luke chapter 2, he gets to be about 12 years old. He's now on the cusp. In that culture, he's going to be considered a man by some, still a boy by others. They go to Jerusalem, you remember the story, and they're there for a while, and then when they leave, and the custom was that the women would leave first. They would leave about a day ahead of the men. The reason for that is because they were going to stop at every service station and every restroom on the way out. So the men would catch up with them in a couple of hours, but the women would leave first, and so Joseph, thinking, well, he's 12, he's still going to be with his mom, thinks Jesus is gone, and she, thinking, well, he's now 12, he's a man in our culture, thinks he's going to be with Joseph. And you remember the story, how that they get away, and when they finally meet up, when the men finally catch up with the women, who did, being honest now, not being funny, who did travel slower than the men, when they finally caught up and they realized that he was not with Joseph and not with Mary and not with any other friends, that they had actually lost this child. Could there be anything more terrifying to any parent than to lose a child? Whenever I see the Amber Alerts, whenever I've seen the milk cartons with the picture of the child on the side, when I hear the statistics of how many children in this country, I don't know about others, but in this country, who go missing every year, and to know the fate, it tears my heart up. But to think that somehow your child is gone and they don't know where he is, they don't know what's happened to him. On one hand, they probably had this kind of faith that, well, he's the Son of God. I mean, God's got to be blessing him. Surely angels are protecting him, so he's really got to be okay. But on the other hand, because they're human, they've got to be thinking, oh my, has somebody taken him? Has somebody hurt him? It's 3 anxious days before they find him again. I know how I would feel as the father, but I think somehow women feel more deeply. So I don't know how to comprehend how she felt as the mother. 3 days, she doesn't know where he is. 3 days, she's in agony. And so the prophecy is beginning to be fulfilled. A sword will pierce your own soul too. They found him, of course. He was teaching in the temple. At 12, he was arguing with the theologians and doing a pretty good job of it. You say, well, why did it take 3 days? My opinion is because they were helping her be prepared for another 3-day period that's going to happen down the line, when he's going to be crucified, and it'll be 3 days before he resurrects. It'll be another time in her life when she will have that same probable crisis of faith where I know he's the Son of God. I know that God is taking care of him. I know the angels are with him. And then the other part of a broken mother's heart, I saw what they did to my boy. I wish I could hold him again. So throughout her life it happens. And sometimes he himself would treat her in a way that we probably wouldn't appreciate. Like when the word began to spread around, when people said, this Jesus, yes, he's working miracles, but it's because he has a demon. And when Mama found out that people were saying her boy had a demon, she got Jesus' brothers, the children that were born after him. She takes Jesus' brothers and she goes to get him, to bring him back. And she comes to this house with her other sons, and the place is so packed they can't even get in. So they send word in, tell Jesus that his mother and brothers are out here. And he says, who is my mother? Who are my brothers? And he pointed to the people sitting in the room. He said, these are my mothers and brothers. This is my mother, my mothers and my brothers, indicating I'm here to save these people. And the word that came back out of the house to her had to have pierced her soul again. Son, don't you love me? I came to get you because I love you. The message, though it sounds harsh to us, was actually what it had to be, which is, I've come for a mission. I've come for a purpose. My time is rather limited now. It didn't indicate a lack of love for his mother. As a matter of fact, he would show later how much he really did love her. But you understand that it had to hurt. And so finally they come to the crucifixion, the trial. And finally they put him on that cross, which is a terrible way to die. They'd beaten him first. And as he's hanging there, she's standing there. I have watched people die. It's kind of one of the things that happens if you're a minister. I watched my father die. Stood in the room with him until he took his very last breath. He died of pancreatic cancer, which was painful enough, but at least he was in a coma. And when he would begin to moan from the pain, we could put some of the liquid morphine under his tongue so it got into a system to alleviate the pain. Not a way I would choose to die, but at least it wasn't a death where there's somebody's hanging on the cross and people are screaming and yelling with hatred. And you can imagine how every one of those screams penetrated and pierced her soul. But as he's dying, he turns to John, one of his, well, maybe even his best friend in the flesh. He turns to John, who was also an apostle, and Mary is standing there, his mother. We've long since lost track of Joseph. The assumption is that somewhere along the line Joseph had died, but that's an assumption. It could be the fact that they talked about Joseph when he was a boy because he was very integral to what was going on. But it could be they just left out Joseph when he was a man because they wanted to emphasize that Joseph wasn't really his father, that God was really his father. So while we think Joseph may have been dead, he may have just been pushed out of the story so as not to confuse who the real father is. But apparently he's not at the foot of that cross. And so Jesus says to John, this is now your mother. And he says to Mary, this is now your son. What he was saying was, I love her. I take care of her. John, you're my best friend here. You're the most loyal friend I have. I need you to take care of my mama. And John would. About 33 years have passed. 34 if you count the pregnancy. From the time that little 15-year-old young lady, minding her own business, living her life, had an archangel show up, scaring her, at least at the outset offending her, and then promising her the greatest gift any woman could ever have. The child you bear will save the world. If she is like us, I think maybe there were times when she would be thinking, I love my son, I'm glad I have him, but I would to God that that angel had never shown up and told me that I had this responsibility. Because this boy, unlike my other children, many people hate, many people love, and they have hurt him again and again and again. Gentlemen, if you found those lyrics, would you put them up for me? Buddy Green lives here in Nashville. If you ever get a chance to meet him, Buddy is a great, great guy. He wrote this song a few years ago about Mary. It became a massive hit, not just here but around the world. He wrote, Mary, did you know that your baby boy would one day walk on water? Mary, did you know that your baby boy would save our sons and daughters? Mary, did you know that your baby boy will give sight to a blind man? Mary, did you know that your baby boy will calm the storm with his hand? Mary, did you know that your baby boy is Lord of all creation? Mary, did you know that your baby boy would one day rule the nations? Did you know that your baby boy has come to make you new? The child that you delivered will soon deliver you. Beautiful. But he captured, I think, the essence of the wonder. Did you know that your baby boy has walked where angels trod? When you kiss your little baby, you kiss the face of God. Mary, did you know? The blind will see, the deaf will hear, the dead will live again, the lame will leap, the dumb will speak the praises of the Lamb. Did you know that your baby boy is heaven's perfect lamb? The sleeping child you're holding is the great I am. As I said, Buddy did a beautiful job of representing that aspect. I don't know if anybody will ever write the other side of it. Mary, did you know your soul will be pierced with a sword? Nobody wants to sing a song like that, but it did. So at Christmas time, when people are concentrating on the child, which we should, and as well pointed out, the resurrection of that child, which makes it all valid, I think we look back to the human side of it and go, what do we learn from Mary? First of all, that God will choose people that nobody else would have picked to do amazing things. Another thing is that when God chooses you and uses you, there is a great and amazing joy that comes with it of knowing that God has used you to do this amazing amount of good, but also to know that with all of that, there will be a piercing of the soul. I don't know anywhere in the Bible of any person God ever chose to do some amazing thing that did not suffer for doing it. Why? Because Jesus always reveals the hearts of people. They can pray, they can play, they can pretend, but when it comes to real life, what they do with Jesus tells who they really are. And those of us who serve Jesus, while we can have the great joy of being used by God, will always, always find ourselves attacked and hurt and pain. It comes with it. So let's rejoice that the child came. Let's appreciate the suffering that he did. Let's feel ecstasy about the fact that he accomplished the resurrection and that we will go to heaven. But let's think about his mama. And let's think about ourselves. And as we go into the year 2014, let's continue to pray, Lord, use me like you used Mary. And Lord, when the pain comes, and I know it will, strengthen me. And as did Mary, I will follow Jesus to the end of my life. That is one of the stories of Christmas that I think must be told.
Go tell